And you've been like a professional, like engineering, like leaders and product leader, marketing leader for many of the different scale, mostly like growth stage, like very successful companies. So I think maybe the next step we wanted to break into is more about maybe you can share a few of the examples of kind of like the external factors such as PMF or some sort of market dynamic, kind of experience failure story that turned to success, and then we can dive into more of an internal struggle of companies. And then lastly, we definitely want to touch base on the leadership and some of the culture and how you build the relationship and influence across different org. And also like Carrie and Tian, feel free to chime in from your strategy and the investor background so we can get more insight about Gilbert's journey. So let's dive into maybe the first external marketing example you can talk about how.
Yeah. So I guess the first example I think of was when I was at Virage, and one of the things about startups is the fact that people believe, well, if this is not the right product or this is not the right team or not the right technology, you can make a switch, right? And I fundamentally believe that yes, you can change the team, you can change the technology, you can change your product, you can change your distribution channel to fix the problem. The thing that can't be fixed is to really address product market fit, you may have to make some changes. But I feel that ultimately the thing you cannot change is where the market is.
Right.
You may want to target a different segment of the market or reach it differently, but the market cannot be changed. And so the example I learned the hard way was that when I was at Virage, we were doing streaming media. So I joined the company in 1997. So at that point, we had some technology which basically was indexing audio. So we felt because of this technology, we can actually go do either a B2B or B2C play. The challenge was that we said, oh, well, okay, we can extract metadata from video stream.
Wow.
But at the same time, we felt that nobody wants to index this stuff themselves. We have to do it automatically, right? So that was our premise. The challenge was that was really our belief because we had technology. Right. So this was in 1998 to 2000. So our technology was getting there about 2000. Yeah. So what we then thought, we saw basically YouTube coming out in 2005, basically. No technology, basically no audio indexing, all the metadata was created by the users, right? And we said, what's the big deal, right? Well, less than a year later, Google buys YouTube, right? And so we, who had all the technology, we thought, because we were working on speech to text, we were working on, extracting metadata out of video stream. So we're doing all this stuff. Just like, okay. So, and the reason why the market was not ready for us was because infrastructure wasn't there. The pipes weren't fast enough, weren't thick enough. And so, that's for the business side. For the consumer side, there's not enough cable modems into the home.
That's right.
So those were two big factors. So that's what I learned. You can't change the market. Those infrastructure and other factors, if you can't change them, then it doesn't work. So we had a good team, good technology, good marketing people, but it didn't make a difference because we felt less technology later, basically got it.
Yeah, I remember I recall an anecdote where you had this discussion with, was it CNN that you mentioned, where you were basically very straightforward and talking to them about how being able to have all this technology cannot solve like the problem that they're trying to look for to be solved. Like, can you touch base a little bit on that one?
Yeah, I think this relates to just the whole topic of when you're in a startup, one of the hardest things is how do you convince a potential customer, a client, or a prospect to basically bet their business on you when because they want the benefits of a startup, right? You want it to be lean, you want it to be very feature rich, you want it to be fast and agile. At the same time, they also, in the back of their head, they also want the things that they don't talk about. They want it to be reliable. They want it to be stable, right? They want all the QA testing, right? And so that came to a head when I was at Virage, a streaming media company, and we had CNN as one of our really early clients. And so It was probably about 98. It was NAB, National Association of Broadcasters show in Las Vegas. I'm sitting there with the VP in charge of the project. And so, you know, we're talking about how things are going. And then he directly asked me, so do you think the project will work? And I said, Kevin, I don't think so.
It's a different Kevin.
Kevin, I don't think it's going to work. So he stopped and thought about it. He says, you're the first vendor to say that to us. There were bigger companies than us who were involved in the project, but we're the first people to say, we don't think it'll work.
I see.
And he said, you may be right, but you're the first people to tell us that. And so he said, why do you say that? I said, well, because we have 2 version 1 products. We're also building on top of a streaming platform that is a metadata product that is basically a version 1 of their product. And so what's happening is that because there's no systems integrator, every time we find a problem, we change things, but it changes either our behavior or it changes our interface. So then we fix something, then someone else has to fix something. If they fix something, they change something, they break something that we have.
Dependence.
And so yeah, so there's vicious cycle because there's no source of truth.
Right.
Everybody's moving. So I said, well, that's what the problem is. Okay, so this is like the week. So okay, next week we're having a big meeting. 19 VPs from CNN are going to be there. Can you fly out? Okay, I fly out. Take a red eye out there, and so it's like so. I was still young in my career. I didn't have a lot of experience, and what happened was that they said, "Well, do you think it's going to work?" I said, "No. You know, my CEO's not happy. The GM at Silicon Graphics is not happy, and the reason why is because we hadn't rehearsed all this stuff, you know." So I say, "Okay, so you don't think it'll work? When do you think it'll work?" I have no idea. Not a really well-trained way of doing it, but it was honest and direct. And so he said, okay, can you do some more research and give us some dates? Okay, I'll do some. I worked with the other teams, and we did come with a date, which basically means we throw out most of our software. I put a software engineer involved to help integrate our products with theirs. And so the next year, we're basically doing custom integration stuff for them. And at the end of it, they said that they were willing to be a reference customer for us. And that also meant that we were able to go public later on.
Wow.
Because of that. Because if you have CNN as your customer,
That's pretty big.
Yeah, pretty big. So,
Yeah.
But that also talks about the relationship you have to have with your clients, and how do you get them to trust you? How do you get yourself to trust yourself? And the reason why I learned that lesson was because before that, when I was at Tan Computers, we once had a big project with Bank of America where we were running one of their systems, and we had a failure of some of our software that caused their database to be unavailable for 2 instances, 7 days in May and 10 days in October. And so because we were helping them run their business, we put them in a really bad spot. And so at that point, it was really horrible. It was a terrible experience. And what I learned from that, the biggest thing is that if my customer ever is in a spot where there's no undo button, I will not let the customer go into production. And that's what I learned for CNN. That's what we did at CNN. We said, you can't do this, because they were going to lay people off, redirect people, break down walls, because they were changing their workflow. And so I said, you can't do this, because if it doesn't work, then you have no undo button. You can't run parallel, you can't go backwards. And so that's why I said you can't do that. So I think that's the lesson. I mean, everybody wants to have the opportunity to run a production system, but then there are risks with it. So how do you basically have something that is not mission critical and balance those two? You want something that's not mission critical because you can practice, but you want something that's mission critical because that's the only way they're going to spend their money. If everything's practiced, they're never going to spend enough money.
Got it.
So that's so those are the 2 of the big lessons.
I see.
That you're going to be direct with your prospects or your clients, and you have to be willing to say things that
Risky.
nobody wants to say in a startup.
I see. So just to summarize, do you feel like when you feel dealing with the business customers, clients, you have to kind of be honest. And you mentioned like the risky aspect, you have to have the good plan and then present it to them.
Yeah, I think the most important thing there is that if you want to sell into enterprise, you have to think about what that means and think about how your software, how your services, how your support, all that stuff runs so that you can be successful with that customer and all the time manage the expectations so that, because that's just part, because that's what builds credibility.
Yeah, but there's definitely a trade-off between acquiring as many design partners or early customers possible versus trying to hold back and build the trust. So sometimes you have to start somewhere. So for a lot of my portfolios, they really struggle with the first 1 or 2 customers acquiring. So do you have any experience regarding that part? How to earn the trust and find the early customers to work with?
Yeah, in terms of earning their trust and finding, I think that when I've been involved in the sales process, typically the most successful, lighthouse or pilot customers are those who have a lot of pain, right? For which they're willing to take some risk. Yes. But the second part of that, there has to be someone, an inside person, who's willing to be your champion, who's willing to take some risk, put some personal relational capital into it, so that you can have, so that person realizes that's what the opportunities for the organization, but there's also a personal, professional reward there. So you have to, I think you need to find both of those too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So my experience has mostly been B2B, so that's why, so I always try to find, okay, who's the person in there that can be our champion, our advocate, because ultimately, there are a lot of people, and this is it's a strategic selling. There are lots of people in every organization who can say no. Who's the person who can say yes?
The decision maker.
That person who says yes has to be a part of your champion team of champions and advocates.
Have you ever had a chance to convert someone who you don't know before to be your champion on the company side?
Most every time it is.
Most every time?
Most every time it is.
Wow.
Most every time. Because I come into a situation where I don't come with domain expertise. I come in, leading and running teams and running engineering processes, but I don't come from a perspective of domain, so I have to earn their trust over time.
Wow.
Right? So they basically, it's not that hard. Conceptually, it's not that hard, but it's hard work. So to get that CNN relationship, for a year I go to every audio conference call we have. I'm there every week. I show up all the time. I do what I'm supposed to do. And so after a while, okay, we know they're going to be predictable. I know they're reliable, so I know I can trust them. And then they'll take measured risk with you. But I think that it's possible to build relationships, but it's always kind of at a personal level.
Gotcha. You feel for engineering background, like early employee or like founder, is that kind of help to find co-founder who have the domain knowledge or like domain connection? Yeah,
in our startup, we had a business development team, and they were basically they looked at all the major networks, and they were basically trying to call on people and trying to find the right people. But this, I guess the way to think about it also is the fact that, because we have some interesting technology, lots of people wanted to have meetings with us, right?
Wow.
But then so many meetings did not end up in a proposal or in a contract. And so I think, pain point, internal champion. The third thing is a project. You have to find a project because you have to have some way to fund it, right? So what's the problem? I mean, they may have a pain point, but what's the problem that you need to help them solve? So they basically, I seen it, they were basically going to start doing streaming instead of beta tapes. So that was their pain point, and the opportunity for them, they're going to reduce the amount of time it would take to stream something, but also they didn't have they literally have people moving carts of videotapes around. This comes from satellite.
Very old.
Yeah, so it's very old. So, but that was the opportunity. There was a project where they could say, if we do this, we will save this money.
So it's like they already have the initiative.
They have a problem they're trying to solve. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do it.
I see.
So they have to figure out, and so that's when I discovered, okay, you have to have, you really have to have the pain point, you have to have the opportunity, and someone is basically giving you the opportunity, being a champion, but third, you have to have a project, because the funding has to come from somewhere.
Makes sense.
So those are the kind of things that early on I learned about, just
about the first customer.
Yeah.
I want to touch a little bit based about because I think acquire the first customer is one big thing for startup, but also scale up is also another biggest problem. Like after you get the first customer and they adopt your product, how could you expand it to more customer? You mentioned it's hard to scale. Do you have kind of experience, examples to share about that aspect?
Yeah, I would say that there's a couple of inflection points in your product team. The first one is, how do you just get one release out? Everyone thinks that's the big problem. That's actually only the beginning of the problem.
Yes.
Get one release out. Okay, you get that release out. Now you have one or two customers, right? Now the salespeople are out there. They want to have more features because they're talking to, customer A says, I like these 25 things, but if you only had these 2 things, we could buy, right? So they're starting their list of 1 or 2 things, right?
Yeah.
And then the next salesperson goes out, sees customer B, we like this 25 stuff, but we want C and D, not A and B, we want C and D, right? So now the product team has to figure out, okay, how do I add these things in, and how do I keep the things moving for the current product I have, so I basically work against my roadmap, right? And so the first thing is, how do I continue to incrementally move things forward on a roadmap, add these features I need from customers, and the third thing is, how do I make sure I increase the quality? So those are 3 different things that every product team can move on 1 or 3 dimensions, and how do you do that? And how to do that, so that's why I used to have a job. It's because you figure out how to do that. But that's what you have to think about, because if a product team focuses on 1 of the 3 and
that would be great.
Right? Because you won't get new customers,
Right.
or your customers that you sold your roadmap on, they're not happy because the salesperson said, we closed the deal, you've got to do these 3 things, and then 6 months, nothing's shown up. Or it gets buggier and buggier, and then you have regressions. And then they say, we bought this, but now, performance is slower, these things, things that used to work don't work anymore. So you have to figure out how to manage all that stuff. So that's kind of the challenge. How do you continue to move your product forward? How do you continue to add features? And how do you improve quality? That's only the beginning. The next thing is now the product teams and the salespeople, the CEO, what they're saying, we need another set of products. So this is just moving incrementally from the current, but now we want another product. So how do you do that? So, but that's where the tough job is, in terms of being a VP of engineering and being a product marketing, because you have to balance all these things. And there are ways to do it, but it's longer than we have time in the podcast. Maybe there's a future podcast.
It's a great segue to my follow-up question, because I think now, thanks to Carrie, talk about the scaling of customer, and now we have this maybe there's more demand, but you also have to scale up your team, right? So they may be one very memorable kind of internal challenges that you face as you were scaling out the teams, because there's engineering that you have to scale out, and you probably hired hundreds of people before, right? So is there an example you can share with us about how you were able to turn a challenge into an internal success?
Yeah, the thing I think about was one of the things I did at the robotics company was that we were responsible for integrating other people's technology devices into our system. And so what that meant was that we would have a big contract that says, okay, you get the contract, but you don't get to recognize revenue, and you won't get the deal unless you integrate these 3 devices. So we had to do that. So what happened after a while is that we kept on, lead times for device integration kept on getting longer and longer and longer, because we had 1 or 2 engineers who were doing it, and every deal there's more work. So if we want to continue the revenue coming in, we had to figure out how to do that. And so then I finally got to a point where I told the CEO, the only way we're going to do this is we have to outsource it. So I got an outsourcing partner based in China, And a couple things about that. So they were a company that had been recommended by our VCs. So we knew that they were reliable. And so when they came in to do their dog and pony show, they said, okay, well, when do you want to fly to China in order to check our facility out? I don't want to do that. Why would I do that? Because everybody wants to do that. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't need to do that. He said, why don't you need to do that? Because everyone does that. Well, because your partners are Intel, HP. What am I going to do as a tiny startup that can basically figure out something that they haven't figured out yet, right? So they said, no, we're gonna send somebody over there to do some train the trainers, and you'll send somebody here, but we'll just do that. And so, but that also meant that I had to go to because we were at that point we had Mayfield was one of our investors, and so that's who the referral came from. So we had to basically use our money wisely, which meant that I told the CEO, okay, I'm gonna trust use these this third-party outsourcing company, but they also meant that you're gonna have to write a check for X amount of dollars, and you can't change your mind in the middle of this. Once you write the check, it has to be all the way to the end, because I won't have anything to show for a little while. Well, it turns out that he got nervous, but also every week I said, can we move ahead? He says, well, I need to think about this. I said, oh, look, I have schedules, I have these contracts, either we do it or we don't do it. And so I had to basically stick my neck out for something where I didn't really know it was going to work. But I said, the only way we're going to basically grow the business is that we have to do this. So we ended up, it was successful. And the side story with that is that because they were based in Shanghai, that meant that there's time zone difference. And even though we used English, no, it was not going to work. But I had one guy who we used as our liaison. So he would usually come in a little bit later. He would basically speak with have a project team meeting with their people, all using Mandarin. So they were all in the same language. And so as a result, he became much more effective. And so what we used to do is we used to stack rank all our employees. And so he moved from the bottom quarter to the top quarter because it played to his strengths. So he was flexible in his hours. He had language skills. He knew how the culture worked.
Oh, nice.
So that made a big difference. But that's because we figured out how do you turn a bug into a feature, right?
How did you find that person?
He was already on staff.
He was
already on staff. It's just that we didn't use him that way.
I see.
So he was, communications was not his strength. Because we had a culture where it's very much, you basically, conflict and tension was the way we made decisions, which is not his style. He backs up, right? Instead of pushing forward hard, he backs up. So, so culturally it was different. Whereas because he was very comfortable working with the outsourcing partner, he could work well with them.
Got it.
How did you identify that transition of turning that bug into a feature? I think that's very insightful. Maybe when you were back in that time, how did you come up with that idea?
Well, the easiest answer is that because he spoke Mandarin. There's other Asians there, but their Mandarin wasn't as good, or they just that's the main reason. But the secondary reason is because culturally he knows how to work with other Chinese in terms of teamwork, and when to press, when not to press. So it's all cultural. It's ultimately culture, but the first filter was language. But then I guess it's a necessary but not sufficient condition for success.
I do want to touch base the previous early topic. In the beginning, we mentioned product market fit, and you mentioned timing, market really important. Before team is ready, if we let you to rank the different factors affect startup, you have the team factors, the timing market factors, or other factors. How would you rank all those factors?
I think the number one thing is the whole product market fit exercise, and that is there aren't, you don't know anything in the building. That's what Steve Blank says over and over again. There is no data inside the building. Because if we're working on and I have a tendency to do that. I'd like to think hard and think about it, but sometimes I have to force myself to go out. Because I'm the person who ready, aim, and then never fire. So you have to go out. And in a product organization, I learned this is that you have to talk to either people who are really going to buy your product. So I was a product manager at Tandem many years ago, where the CEO says we need this product, and so all the marketing people said, we talk to our customers, we talk to salespeople, nobody needs it, nobody wants it, right? You're talking to the wrong people. He says, I'm talking to the CEO, the CIO, they need this product. We're talking to the IT director, to sysadmins, we're talking to another, they don't have this problem, but the person on top, he has the problem.
I see.
So, but until you go outside of the building and talk to people, and then when you have a conversation about product features, it's the person who has here's what happens in engineering, right? Engineers say, we should do these things. They say, I don't know about that, And then they say, well, if we put this feature in, I would use it. And then I have to say, well, that's true, but you're not the person buying the product. So therefore, but on the other hand, so that's one side. I now flip around, I'm on the engineering side, right? Product person comes to me and says, we need to do these 5 things. And I say, well, why do we think we need to do that? Well, because the market says this, or we marketing say that. How they will win the game is they say, I talked to these 3 customers and they said this, this, and that. And these customers are, either our potential customers, or current customers, or prospects, or people in our market. And so the people who have the data, who talk to real customers, they can win. They should be the ones winning the battle. But in a lot of startups, it's all engineering led, right? They say, we should do this because we can do it. We should do this because we like this. We want to do this because
we like
I want to work on it, right? But someone has to go out and talk to a real live customer and say, there's no demand for it, Because as soon as you build the feature, you have to test it somewhere. So obviously the marketing person, if they're good, will spend time talking to those people, and then you get ideas. Should we do this, this, or that?
One thing you both mentioned in the previous conversation, potential needs, which maybe not that obvious at the current stage, because technology have a cycle. How do you think about the technology cycle and the kind of the use case or clients' needs along with this cycle?
Well, there's 2 dimensions to it. One dimension is that if you're going to sell into the enterprise has some pretty standard stuff that it wants. And so if you keep that in mind, then when you build your product, you basically make sure that that's all piece of it, right? So you want to make sure that the database is reliable. You want to make sure that it can scale. You have a bunch of things you think about for the enterprise, and it's not because I know about that enterprise. It's because when you're a big company, there are certain things that they want to have. So that's one piece of it. The other thing is the whole Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm and the whole technology adoption curve, and just knowing that there's a part of it which has innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and just know that as you are building features, you have to kind of say, is this something that everyone will use? Is this important to everybody?
Or just early adopter.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right.
I actually want to follow up on the timing as well. Especially when you talk about you were one of the pioneers on the streaming use cases, but actually YouTube was the one who took the final fruit. The final fruit. Yeah. So how far away are you from them? What's the actual gap of years or months, and how you kind of see, if we are a startup, we find there is the product need, but we don't know how long the technology will catch up. Right. So I actually have an example right now. So you probably know about the AR and the VR. It's a wave that's coming repetitively. So for companies who are trying to do innovation with AR and VR, they are counting on the early majority to come up some point. But however, it's really hard to time the market. So whether they should pivot or they should wait, or how long could they survive, I think I do see a parallel between your story with you guys pioneered on the streaming, but actually you didn't wait long enough. You didn't survive until the YouTube point. So what's your advices for those companies, and how long do you think the gap should be?
I don't really have a good answer because it is tough in the sense that if I think about that situation, I would say that part of it is the tech, are you with the technology going to the market, or is the market coming to you? In other words, when YouTube versus our company Virage, the infrastructure was coming to us. We didn't have to do anything more in terms of technology. So that's one piece of it, because that part you can't change. The part you can change is the technology to move closer to them. So there's nothing we could have done in terms of technology that would have accelerated our success, because it was just, there wasn't enough infrastructure, and we made some bad, some, I wouldn't say bad, but we didn't pick the right things to focus on.
I want to elaborate on that a little bit. What is the right things to work on at that time?
I think that ultimately the big play at that point was B2C. We were doing B2B.
Oh, I see.
So your YouTube is B2C directly.
Right.
B2C first, and then as B2C got more popular, then people who are companies were willing to do B2B.
Okay.
I see. For the streaming
Yeah.
product at that time. So you think YouTube took the right way to start from B2C first, and the company are more focusing on B2B, like the CN customer.
Yeah.
And one point I actually want to elaborate. Previously, you mentioned this to us. You feel it's harder from transit from B2B to B2C compared with from B2C to B2B in a technology level?
I would say that technology, if you build it for B2B, it is more robust, but you may have more challenges scaling.
I see.
It's typically more robust,
Right.
but that's why it's sometimes harder to scale, because you basically, your database is bulletproof, your connections, all that stuff is really highly reliable, right? It's repeatable, reliable. You don't lose money transferring money from point A to point B. People, But if you're, if you're watching a video and it, okay, I'm gonna restart. That's fine. I can deal with that, right? Going from B2B in terms of B2C, the other thing that changes is that so much more depends on understanding who the potential prospect client or user is. Whereas you can draw personas for your typical, customers. If you're a product manager, well, here's the 5, 3, 5, 7 personas that we're going to talk to. But it's much harder when you do B2C. Who are those people, right? Sometimes you don't even know.
Too many.
Right.
Data points.
Okay, there's a scatter, right?
I think you mentioned a good point where in the early 2000s, there is a huge growth of a DSL and modem in the different household, especially in North America. Whereas their company back then were more focused on like the bigger company, B2B kind of storage. But because of the modern, all this like internet got much faster, where people can actually upload stuff to the internet. That kind of like drive all those adoption of YouTube.
I see.
Right.
So a couple things you feel like affect the success of the company and YouTube at that time. One is like they choose the right approach, B2C. Another is they have the infrastructure ready. Those are kind of the two biggest factors.
Yeah. They didn't have to build the infrastructure, but the infrastructure was getting more and more in place between cable modems through the providers like Comcast, as well as
Comcast,
the whole DSL stuff coming in from AT&T and the other side. So those two things made a big difference. So I would say we didn't know that. We couldn't have guessed that. even went to B2B. The B2B part is like some of our customers are on Major League Baseball, but that the play there is that we sell to them, but there has to be they have to sell to, they have to have a B2C. Yes, a B2B and a B2B2C. Right? Because without that part, they're not going to consume all that video stuff.
They will not have the project for
the end user is the C customer.
So that means they were dependent on something that wasn't existing either, or there's not as much uptake. Whereas if there was huge demand, then it would be there.
Got it, got it. That's a good.
Very nice.
Yeah.
That's a good lesson
That's a
for
good
nowadays
lesson.
nowadays founders to learn because we're, as Tim mentioned, we're seeing all the new technology like AR, VR, AI, and the technology is kind of at early stage, and for them it's struggling in find the right customer and also find the right timing to get into the market.
But I think if you could go back to the other part of what I said is that find a problem, solve it for someone who has a pain point and has a project and there's a champion. If you find those three things, then it's more likely that you can.
Chances are higher.
Yeah, chances are higher that you can find success.
Yes.
Early stage.
That's awesome.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. I know we're at time, but definitely want to just like let you know that I'm sure everyone here like felt very touched from all this experience you share, especially during the early 2000s when I grew up in the internet, started using YouTube, uploading my first video.
Oh, you upload at that
2006,
time?
yeah.
2006.
Yeah,
Oh,
so-
I
so
don't even know.
I kind of like, wow, that is like coming, like listening to your perspective as an industry like professional working on technology that enable people to do that. That's really amazing. And even like fast forward now, like I'm trying to start my own company, but at the same time I constantly try to remind myself and my team that we need to walk out the building, talk to more people, and not just get stuck on our own tiny vision sometimes.